Hello, 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 everyone. It is Wednesday, July 2nd. I hope you had a wonderful Canada Day if you are in Canada. If you're not in Canada, yesterday was our big birthday, 158 years. Our country is not that big. I mean, it's not that old. It's a fairly new country still. Well, welcome. Welcome everyone to my live. I'm English teacher Linda G, and I'm really happy that you're here with me today. If this is your first time joining me live, please say hello in the chat. Thank you for joining me live today. And of course, if you're watching the replay, you can simply write, hi, teacher Linda G, or hi, Linda. And please let me know where you're watching from because I always love to know where my viewers are watching me from. Now, I've been teaching English as a foreign language for many years. I have students that live in Brazil and in China and in Japan, in Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and I even have some students that live in my home country, Canada. Some of them are new immigrants and they know how to speak English, but they're wanting to improve their English as well. So this month, we're starting a brand new theme. Last month, it was all about meetings, and this month, it's about negotiations and persuasion. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And of course, over the next few weeks, we'll also be talking about negotiations and persuasions. I'll be introducing you to different phrases over the next month. Now, we know that these phrases, these skills, negotiation skills and persuasion skills are very important, not just for business or work, but also for everyday life, right? So, for example, if you want to have a discount or ask for a discount at a market, you will need to use some of your negotiation skills. If you are suggesting a restaurant to a friend, you will need some of those skills as well. Or maybe you're negotiating deadlines at work. You can see how very useful these phrases are. All right, so let's learn how to do that in English today. First, we're going to start with some phrases to make a suggestion. So to offer a suggestion. Now, I'm going to name you, I'll give you some different phrases, all sorts of different phrases, in this case, to suggest something. For example, how about we, here's an example, how about we meet halfway on the price? How about if we meet halfway on the price? How about if we go out for dinner tonight together? How about if we go out for dinner tonight? Here's another sentence or phrase for you. Would you consider, for example, would you consider extending the deadline by 1 day? Here's another example. Would you consider meeting again next week? Would you consider? All right, next phrase. Why don't we? Why don't we? For example, why don't we schedule another meeting next week? These are questions, right? Why don't we? Why don't we plan to get together again in a month from now? Why don't we? Here's another question. What if we, all right, what if we split the cost? That means that you pay half and I pay the other half. What if we added an extra service at no additional charge? Would that work for you? What if we? So you can see how these phrases are really, really useful when you're asking for something, right? Now, let's talk about when you want to disagree, but still be polite. You know, in Canada, we are very polite. And we will use these types of phrases. For example, I see your point, but I see your point of view, but, or I see your perspective, but, So, for example, I see your point, but I think there's a better way of doing this. I see your point about wanting faster delivery, but we'd need to adjust our costs slightly to make it possible. I see your point. Here's another example. Would you be open to discussing a revised price for expedited service? So I see your point about wanting faster delivery, but we need to adjust the cost slightly to make that possible. Would you be open to? Would you be open to is another phrase that you can use. So these phrases are to explain when you're disagreeing with somebody, very politely. You're not agreeing with them, you're disagreeing. You want to disagree with them, but in a very polite way. So here's another way of saying it. For example, I'm afraid I can't agree to those conditions. I'm afraid I can't agree to those conditions. I'm afraid I won't be able to meet that deadline. I'm afraid I'm afraid we, right? Another useful phrase is, that might be difficult for us. That might be difficult for us. So, for example, that might be difficult for us at this time. That might be difficult for us at that price point, but we could explore some other options. So that might be difficult for us, or that might be difficult for me, right? These are all great ways of using that phrase. Here's another one. Here's another phrase for you. I understand what you're saying, but I understand what you're saying, but I understand what you're saying, but I have to disagree. Understand what you're saying, but our budget won't allow it. So the phrase is, I understand what you're saying, but. Now let's practice. Imagine someone says, I think we should double the price. I think we should double the price. How would you politely disagree? How would you politely disagree? And of course, you could type your answer in the chat box. And if anybody responds, I'll check what your answers are. You can respond by typing your sentence in the chat box. Now, the question was, I think we should double the price. So how would you politely disagree using some of the phrases that I've just mentioned here? And of course, if you are watching the replay, please add your question below as well, and I'll respond to it. All right, let's keep going. We're going to move on now. When you want to, when you want to persuade or convince someone, you might say these phrases. So when you want to persuade someone or convince someone, you might say, if you think about it, this benefits you because, if you think about it, this benefits you because. So here's an example. If you think about it, this benefits you because you'll save time and money. If you think about it, this benefits you because it gives you more flexibility moving forward. So if you think about it, this benefits you because, and you explain why it's benefiting them. All right, here's another phrase. I strongly believe this is the best option because. I strongly believe this is the best option because it's faster and it's safer. I strongly believe this is the best option. Or you can say, I strongly believe this is your best option because it's the most practical solution given your current situation. So I strongly believe this is the best option, or this is your best option because. Right, another great phrase to use is you'll find that this is a smart choice because. You'll find this is a smart choice because. Okay, you'll find this is the smart choice because it improves productivity. You'll find this is a smart choice because it saves you both time and money in the long run. All right, here's another phrase. It makes sense to choose this option because. It makes sense to use this option because. And here's some examples. It makes sense to use this option because it's cost effective. It makes sense to choose this option because it aligns perfectly with your goals and budget. All right, it's your turn now. It's your turn. Finish this sentence in the chat. And if you're watching the replay, of course, complete the sentence. I strongly believe this is the best option because. I strongly believe this is the best option because. And you can type it in the chat. I strongly believe this is the best option, or this is your best option because. All right, good work. All right, so this is the last part of our live. This is the last part. And these phrases are good to use when you're ready to close a deal. You're ready to finalize a deal, or you're ready to confirm an agreement. For example, you can say, so do we have a deal? It's a question, right? So do we have a deal? For example, you could say, if you agree to this, do we have a deal? And it's a question. Notice how my intonation's going up. If you agree to this, do we have a deal? Right? You're asking them if they're in agreement, if they can finalize the agreement. Here's another phrase. Let's shake on it. Let's shake on it. Perfect. Let's shake on it and move forward. Let's shake on it. All right, here's another example. I think we have a good agreement here. I think we have a good agreement here. I think we have a good agreement here. Let's move ahead. Right? I think we have a good agreement here. Let's sign the contract, for example. Here's another phrase. I'm happy with that if you are. I'm happy with that if you are. That's a statement. It's not a question. I'm happy with that if you are. Let's finalize it. I'm happy with that if you are. Let's close the deal. I'm happy with that if you are. Let's sign our contract. All right, good work. So let's review some of the phrases that you learned today. There was quite a few of them. Repeat them after me. How about we, would you consider, why don't we, these are all phrases we looked at. And of course, if you're watching the replay, or if you're coming on live right now, you'll want to watch the entire replay, the entire live. Next one we said is, what if we met next week to discuss it again? I see your point, but I see your point, but, or I see your perspective, but I'm afraid I can't agree to that. I'm afraid I can't agree to that. That might be difficult for us, or that might be difficult for me. That's a phrase. I understand what you're saying, but I understand what you're saying, but if you think about it, this benefits you because if you think about this, if you think about it, this benefits you because I strongly believe this is the best option because I strongly believe this is the best option because You'll find that this is a smart choice because or you can say you'll find this is a smart choice because we can remove the that there. It makes sense to choose this option because it makes sense to choose this option because. So, do we have a deal? That's a question. So, do we have a deal? Let's shake on it. Let's shake on it. I think we have a good agreement here. I'm happy with that if you are. I'm happy with that if you are. All right. Good work. And of course, if you can think of ways to use these phrases, type them in the chat box. Now, before we finish our live, let me know in the chat, which phrase will you use this week? Which phrase will you use this week? And if you're watching the replay, tell me which phrase will you use this week? And of course, if you enjoyed this live, please remember to like this video or to subscribe to my YouTube channel, English Teacher Linda G. And you can also invite me to connect on LinkedIn as well, so that you'll know when I'm going live the next time. I'm English Teacher Linda G, and I will see you in the next live session. Now, for more information on my services and to get a copy of my practice list, go to my website at www.speakenglishwithmoreconfidencenow.com. That's speakenglishwithmoreconfidencenow.com. That's it for today. I will see you next week, same time, same place. Take care now, everyone.